Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of BHBA Family Law Presents Direct Examination with Dan and Lauren. Along with Lauren Youngman from Youngman Reichstein, I'm Dan Bemmel, financial advisor and certified divorce financial analyst. During each episode of our show, we'll explore our guest's personal and professional history and dig into a meaningful legal topic. Please continue to join us for our upcoming episodes, always at 12:30 p.m. live on Zoom. Ron Broad on April 6th, Dan Jaffe on May 4th, Alexander Lytra on June 1st, and Kendra Thomas and Gina Kang, our BHBA Family Law Section Leadership, on July 6th. The links are already up on the bar's event calendar and will also be available in the chat box. Lauren.
Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. You will receive your MCLE certificate shortly after the program. Please take a moment to complete the survey that's included with your certificate. The Family Law section is sponsored by White, Zuckerman, Warsofsky, Luna, and Hunt, and Our Family Wizard. White, Zuckerman, Warsofsky, Luna, and Hunt provides a wide variety of resources to complete almost any project, large or small. They also provide traditional accounting and tax practice services. We invite you to contact them to discuss your specific accounting needs and learn how they can be of service to you. Our Family Wizard is a secure co-parenting platform that supports divorced or separated parents in managing the daily responsibilities of raising children. Specialized features help co-parents organize routines, share files, track expenses and payments, check in at exchanges, send messages, and more, all while thoroughly documenting their activity. Okay, that's it for the housekeeping, and we can go ahead and get started, Dan.
Okay, today we welcome Judge Amy Pellman to direct examination. As you all know, Judge Pellman is the supervising judge for the Family Law Division of the Los Angeles Superior Court. Her publications and accolades are way too numerous to mention in full, but here are a few. Judge of the Year from the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, Judge of the Year from Southwestern Law School, the Outstanding Community Service Award from Levitt and Quinn Family Law Center, and Family Law Judge of the Year from the American Inns of Courts, Southern California chapter. We have so much to explore today, but first and most importantly, Judge Pellman, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, our main goals today are to get to know you a little better and learn hopefully quite a bit from your experience. And we'll get to a lot of that, but we want to start by following up on last week's fantastic What's New in Department 2 program. We've gotten a lot of questions and a lot of feedback. So let's start there. You made it clear during the program that you're never afraid to make a ruling, but it's always better if the parties resolve their disputes before ending up in front of a judge. Spent a lot of time on that. So we're curious to know what specific incentives or programs are you considering to promote ADR or make it more accessible for the full range of litigants?
Well, I should probably ask you the same question. In my view, trying to help litigants to resolve their disputes without a full trial, without coming to court multiple times is always extremely helpful. It's helpful for them in their lives. It's helpful to the children. It's helpful in their communication with each other. Studies have shown that when people come to the agreement themselves, they're much more likely to follow it than when it's imposed by a judge. There's confidentiality in mediation, and people get to say things to each other like, I'm sorry, that they wouldn't say in the course of litigation. So whatever I can do to help with that, I'm going to do. Right now, I'm at a bit of a disadvantage, frankly, because we're down 4 bench officers and there's no judges being appointed right at this moment. Hopefully that's going to change in the not too distant future. But, even as we all know, even with new bench officers, they have to be trained and um, it's a different situation. So I think, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to look outside of our court, because, 5 or 6 judges can't handle all of these ADR requirements that this huge court system involves. So I'm looking at different types of, we're restarting the DSO program, we're looking at expanding it, we're looking at making the VAST program, there's a couple of different ones, more accessible. And we're also looking at other types of mediation programs for other types of cases like civil harassments that tend to take up a lot of airtime in our courts at this moment.
Right. Another issue or topic that you discussed during What's New in Department 2 was your approach to judicial officer retention in the Family Law Division. You had mentioned that you were going to be creating programs or working groups. Could you share with us what some of those working groups will be and what their goals will be?
Well, what I'm trying to do is, it's sort of like mediation, in the sense that when a parent participates in something, they have more skin in the game. And I think when we have amazing talent on our family law bench and a lot of interest in different subjects. So take, for example, case management. And, how should we develop a case management educational program? So I'm working with a couple of judges on that. I'm working with a couple of judges on how we utilize our research attorneys, which doesn't really have to do with you, but is an important part of our work. How do we train new judges? What's the training now? Is it good training? Is it bad training? Is it enough training? Should we have ongoing? My inclination is that we need to keep educating. We need to have mentorship programs within the bench, which I'm setting up. And also, because of the pandemic, there's been a lot less interaction between the bench officers. So I'm trying to change that by eventually, I haven't done it yet, but I'm in the midst of setting up different study groups, if you will, and developing different protocols. I'm also completely revamping the temporary judge program, and I'm having a number of judges help me with that. I don't need to be the only one doing things, and frankly, what's best is for me is to give, to help see other judges take ownership and take leadership.
I like that. And we'll come back to the court and your time on the bench specifically in a bit, but let's talk a little bit about how you ended up in the chair in the first place, and maybe go wind the clock back even further. Was law school, did that always feel like your destiny, becoming a lawyer?
No, I didn't have any lawyers in my family. I did come from a divorced family. I was quite young, and it was an extremely contentious divorce throughout my entire childhood. Maybe that's why I didn't think of becoming a lawyer, certainly not family law. So when I went to college, I do have a lot of doctors in my family, and I thought I was going to do pre-med, but I didn't really think of it much in high school since I only took 9th grade biology. And so I went to a college that sent more women, because it was an all women's college, to medical school than any other school in the country at that time. I took biology, chemistry, physics, and calculus. And when I realized that I would come home and put all my books on my dorm room bed and then go to sleep, I thought maybe this wasn't such a good option. And I started pivoting, as they say, and I started taking political science classes and I really found that I really enjoyed those classes and really felt invigorated.
And did you get involved in public service at that time?
Yes, I did. And I was brought up in that world, in the sense that I went to a school that emphasized public service, social responsibility, and really examined bias and other types of isms in our society. So from an early age, I was exposed to those types of issues, and my mother was also quite involved in some of those issues as well. So I ended up getting an externship at Amnesty International one summer, and found out about a woman who had been disappeared in Guatemala. This is, the early 80s, dating me here. And so I went back to school, and turned out that she had gone to Mount Holyoke College, where I went to school, and I did a whole campaign to try to bring attention to her case. Also, her 2-year-old son was disappeared with her as well. So that was sort of the beginning of my political involvement, and that, I guess, led to me becoming the president of the student government at the time.
Are there any parallels between being the head of the student government, if that was the first kind of bigger political group, and where you find yourself now?
Well, I think by nature I'm a problem solver, and I've always been a collaborator. So I think that was a natural place for me to go. I guess prior to that, I had also Mount Holyoke's part of the 5 colleges, kind of like the Scripps, the Claremont colleges, Amherst, Smith, Mount Holyoke. Anyway, so I had been on the 5 colleges committee, and I was starting to understand how working together with different institutions, you could really get things done.
So after this experience, that led you to work in politics as a consultant, right?
My first job was, yes, working with a man who's named David Garth, who was, I think, either the first or one of the first major political consultants in New York. I actually worked with his international division, and they did various campaigns internationally.
And what was that experience like?
It was really interesting. I was, low person on the totem pole. My boss was, shall we say, very excitable. And so he would often start yelling and slam down the phone and break the phone. And so one of my jobs was to go out and buy new phones, which I did on a regular basis. But what I also did was I had to read like 7 newspapers a day. And if we were working on a campaign, let's say in Italy, I would have to write various different research projects on kind of what was going on. So it was really very interesting. And I learned a tremendous amount.
So you ended up as the death penalty coordinator back at Amnesty. Is that what finally propelled you to law school, that work?
Yes. I wasn't sure that I really wanted to enter politics per se. And I got a call from Amnesty that they were looking for someone to be the interim death penalty coordinator, which I knew nothing about, for the US section. And because of my work, they knew me, and they said, well, this isn't a permanent offer, obviously, but we need a placeholder. And so I did that job, and realized that I would never get a job like that if I didn't have an advanced degree, and law school seemed to be the right one. But it was a fascinating opportunity.
So then you went to law school, and what was your law school experience like?
Well, much to my parents' chagrin, I decided on CUNY Law School as opposed to other law schools that I was accepted to, because CUNY was a new law school at the time. I was only in the second graduating class, but it was a law school that was devoted to training lawyers in public interest and public service. And since I knew that's what I wanted to do, I chose that law school a little bit naively at the time. Initially, their bar passage, I did not take the bar in July because of the job I had, and I took it in February, but the July pass rate was, I think, 27%.
Oh, wow.
So that was a little bit upsetting. It worked out for me, but it was, they fixed it by now, but it was not a law school that was training you to take the bar, I'll put it that way.
So continuing the focus on public interest during law school, was that a through line while
Yes.
you were there too?
Yes, it was. I did various internships. I worked for the Commission on Women. I worked for Now Legal Defense Fund. I worked on an amicus brief for Lambda Legal Defense. So yeah.
And then after you get out, you take the bar, you pass, you get out. I know you had a really interesting series of diverse practice experiences, right? So I know you were a staff attorney, but kind of like an ombudsman role. You had a clerkship in the Second Circuit, and you represented AIDS victims against insurance companies. What did you take from that work, and did any of those jobs help you clarify what you wanted to do, or what you didn't want to
do? Well, they did help me clarify what I didn't want to do. I always say that to law students or young lawyers, that it's just as important to know what you don't want to do as what you want to do, because I think we all ideally think of what we want to do when we're in law school, but don't know what the day-to-day work is. So yes, my first job was working for Governor Cuomo, not Andrew Mario. And I was the Manhattan ombudsperson, which was a fascinating job where I was the liaison between the communities in Manhattan and the state agencies. But I decided that politics was definitely not for me after that job. And then I was fortunate enough to get the clerkship at the Second Circuit, which I really loved, which I don't know if the Ninth Circuit has something like this, but the Second Circuit, it was sort of the public interest clerkship, I guess. And that was really interesting. I really wasn't, I dabbled, as you can see, and I always say I'm a late starter. So it really, I wasn't sure where I was going to land. And then I ended up working for a brilliant guy, Mark Scherzer, who was doing groundbreaking work on behalf of people with AIDS.
So after, well, then after that role, how did you end up moving out to California? What brought you out here?
Well, as many of us, a relationship.
That's a common story.
We'll see. It's
But,
either that or the weather.
Yeah. Well, the weather makes you stay. But yeah, I moved to California. I didn't know one person, not one person. But I was able to get a job before I came. I was fortunate about that. But it's hard to get a public interest job when you don't know anyone. So I ended up getting a job in a private firm, a small firm, where I was the only associate for 5 partners, which was difficult. And whenever I
Yeah.
see one of those 5 partners, I still apologize.
And so then how did you end up going from that firm into children's court?
Well, I realized very quickly that it was not, civil litigation was not something that I really felt passionate about. And it was also a very difficult situation to be in a firm where a lot of people are giving you things to do and you don't have anybody to really talk to or process with. So so I left that firm really for the first time in my life and didn't have another job immediately. I've always had jobs. I had a job right out of college. I've been working since I was 15. I had to get a worker's permit when I was 15. So that was a real challenge for me, because I realized that here I am, been a lawyer for 6 years, 5 in New York and 1 there and here, and maybe I'm not meant to be a lawyer. Maybe it's just not going to work out for me. And I realized that I wanted to go to court and see what that was like. And I just started cold calling people and called some of my old friends in New York, who called some people out here. And I've always been interested and done things with children. I did a lot of work with children in high school, and so somebody said, well, you should try juvenile court. I had never even heard of juvenile court. So I cold called 2 people, one of whom called me back and said, you can come shadow me. And I walked into the children's court and I thought, this is where I want to work. So I, weirdly enough, took that woman's job, didn't take it from her, she left. But she ended up leaving and I ended up taking her job.
And so you got involved pretty deeply. You really jumped in and ended up writing the ABCs of dependency court, right?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to get pretty intense about things when I'm interested. I mean, in those days, there was no training. There were no treatises. And I kept asking Joe Kaplan, who was my boss at the time, is there something you can help me with? Because I was handed 300 cases and said, good luck. And she said, no, here's the Welfare and Institution Code. And I said, there's no manual, there's no nothing. And she said, well, I mean, no, you can write one if you want. I think she said that off the cuff. And I thought, okay. So I wrote it really to teach myself in 1994. And I still update it. Probably would have been a millionaire if I had charged for it. But what I'm happy to say is that it's used to new lawyers and new judges. That's pretty much the first thing they read when they come to dependency court. So I really loved the work. It was incredibly fulfilling, frustrating, enlightening. I learned a tremendous amount. And that I started doing a lot of teaching and other writing.
So on the teaching side, what did you take away from that experience? You taught both at Southwestern and at USC, and I know mentoring students and even mentoring now is still really important to you. How would you, from a practical standpoint, how did you approach mentoring and teaching, and how would you advise experienced attorneys now to take younger attorneys or students under their wing?
Well, we have to all pay it forward, right? And probably if we look back on our lives, there was at least one person, hopefully more, who gave each of us a chance. And so I very much believe in helping new lawyers, law students, exposing them to different areas of law, helping them to be better lawyers. So so I had externs when I was my whole time, even when I was at children's court. I had an externship program at the Alliance for Children's Rights, and I've had externs every single semester and summer since I've been on the bench since 2005.
And with your experience, even now with students, what inspires them to pursue family law? What gets them interested in our practice?
Well, I think they see, first of all, how interesting it is. It's never boring. I think it's intimidating because hard to become an expert when there's so many different areas of law. It's the ultimate in crossover law. But I think they also see how satisfying it can be to help people during some of the most traumatic times of their lives, and also what a huge impact they can have on children when children are involved.
So after you were working in the dependency court, you spent time with the Alliance for Children's Rights. Can you explain its mission and its role for those of us who might not be familiar with the organization?
Sure. The Alliance for Children, I haven't been involved for a long time now, but
Well, back then.
yes, although I think their dinner is coming up pretty soon. The Alliance is a great organization. It came out of Public Counsel. Many of you are probably familiar with Public Counsel, which is a bigger organization, although the Alliance has gotten quite large now. What's interesting about the Alliance is that it was an organization that was devoted to providing free legal services for children in poverty. What also drew me to the Alliance was that it not just provided direct services, so it did provide a number of ancillary services for children in the dependency delinquency system, but also just children out in the community. So we did, guardianships and probate, and other type of work. And then what we also did was some large actions, suing the county on behalf of children with mental illness. We were part of a lawsuit that closed McLaren. We sued the county when the county wasn't visiting children once a month. So it was micro and macro. And I was fortunate enough to help start some new programs there, special ed, public benefits, and also start the National Adoption Day.
I want to move us a little bit more towards your time and your perspective on the bench. But one of the things you mentioned was being aware of your parents' divorce at a young age. I'm curious how how being that process and knowing about that might impact your approach on the bench, if at all.
Well, I think that all of our experiences impact us, as well they should. The trick is not to be biased by them, and the trick is to constantly self-monitor to make sure that you're not being influenced in any kind of negative way by your own experiences. I do joke that I'm perfect for family law since I was the product of a highly elongated litigation, which includes a published case in New York. So I've been, and I've also myself been I've been a step parent. I've been a stepchild. I was married to someone, and the kids are our kids. I consider them my kids also. Went every other weekend to their father. I've seen it from a lot of different perspectives. And yes, my own experience, understanding what it's like to be a part of a family, because you're always part of a family where your parents hate each other and don't speak to each other, and what that impact is, and just being curious about how that has affected me or affected other people that I know, or even the children that I represented, I think has greatly impacted my life as well as my work.
Did that influence your decision or spur you to start thinking about becoming a judge?
No.
So how did that start? How did you start thinking about it?
Kind of.
Or when did you start thinking about it? Yeah.
Frankly, I never ever thought about becoming a judge. It never really even occurred to me. I loved being an advocate. I started to get a lot of people saying, you should really think about getting on the bench. You have a good demeanor for it, et cetera, et cetera. And I had been at the Alliance over 5 years and sort of was thinking, what's next? And really at the spur of the moment, 2 weeks before the commissioner application was due, I decided to throw my application in. And then as a result of that, I thought, well, if I'm going to apply to be a commissioner, I might as well apply to be a judge. That's so I was pretty naive, honestly.
Well, you say you were naive. What were your expectations at that time when you submitted that application?
I didn't really think I would get it. I didn't think I'd get on the list the first time. And then when I got on the bench, it felt like the perfect job for me. So I really love being a judge.
Well, what was that process like then, going from being a commissioner to going through the process to become a judge?
Difficult. I think, certainly back then, I was not your typical candidate. I was not a DA. I was not a partner in a large law firm. I didn't even go to law school here. So I didn't have a lot of juice. And my entire career was public service, public interest, not just, and I wasn't even a government attorney. So, but, I did a lot of writing, I did a lot of teaching, and I think that really helped. So I was really fortunate. I mean, it was a little bit of a rough ride. My application went rather quickly initially, and then the governor was recalled. So I wasn't really sure what to do after that.
So what happened after Governor Davis was recalled? What did you do? What did you do?
Well, I thought, what I always tell people who are applying to the bench is, just think about everybody you know and everybody who knows somebody you might know, and just keep talking to them. And I did that. And a board member from the Alliance knew Maria Shriver and supposedly mentioned my name, but of course you never know. And I ended up at an event with Maria Shriver speaking, and I thought, okay, this is my opportunity. Figured out which direction she was going to exit. Did what do they call it, an end run? Gave her my card and said, I think so and so has mentioned my name. It was a 15-second conversation.
I usually do that where the food's coming out from by the door of the wedding, not with the First Lady of California.
Yeah, I went back to my my New York roots and tried to have a little chutzpah there. So a couple of weeks later, I got a call from her chief of staff who said, we want you to resubmit your application since now you've been on the bench for a couple of years. And even so I did. I had to do the whole thing over again. And even then I wasn't sure, am I going to have to go through the Jenny again? Am I going to have to? I really didn't know. And then 3 months later I was appointed. So.
What were your first assignments when you got on the bench?
My very first assignment was in Downey. I had no idea where Downey was. And at first I was UD's traffic and small claims for a few months. And then I was asked to do Prop 36, which was a drug diversion court. But I was only there, I think, about 9 months. And then I was recruited to family.
Can you tell us a little bit about that recruitment?
Well, I did find out later that the family law bench was having a meeting and trying to think of people they could try to recruit. And Harvey Silberman at the time was a commissioner. I think he was still a commissioner. Yeah, he was still a commissioner at that time. He was actually on my commissioner list. And we knew each other from our public interest. And Gretchen Taylor, I guess, also knew of me and had followed some things in my career. So I got a call from Gretchen Taylor, and she said she wanted to come down to Downey and have lunch with me. And she was so friendly, I thought, I must know her. And I just don't remember. But when she showed up, I thought, I don't know you. And basically, she took me out to a sushi lunch and convinced me to come to family law.
And so from there, when you transitioned to family law, did you immediately go to Central District, and what was that?
Well, I was fortunate. I was fortunate and unfortunate, I guess, in some ways, because I was put in Judge Kronstadt's court. I was just a commissioner. And also back then there was no training. My entire training was watching him for a couple of hours in an afternoon. And the only thing I learned was that when he was stressed, he would go like this a lot. And that when he was annoyed, he'd say, stop.
And he had tells.
Which, those are good things to learn. But I was lucky because my next door neighbor at Mosque was Judge Thomas Trent Lewis. And so we actually became friends. In fact, we went to New Judges College together the next year.
So you were in family law for a bit and you moved over to dependency court. And that's where there's even more of a, as we could say, public record or public profile of you really. What happened, and how did it happen that the county started papering you on almost every case? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you'll have to ask them that, but
from your perspective.
So I was in family for, I think, about 6 years, and I was really liking it and kind of feeling like I was finally getting it, I guess. And basically the presiding judge of juvenile had been wanting me to come back there for a number of years. And, it's a little bit like, the football trading when they decide who goes where.
The draft.
The draft, exactly. So I was told that's where you're going, which was fine. I think there was a couple of issues. I think one issue was I was known to be a very strong advocate, and I had spent a lot of time in that area of law. And sued the county on more than one occasion. I don't know how much that influenced them, but I would probably think it did, unfortunately. And also, I was a strong advocate for the rights of the parties. In addition to, I wanted to do the right thing. And reunification is the top priority. And so we came to blows on a couple of cases where they didn't think the children should be returned, which they were, and thank God nothing ever happened. Everything worked out fine. And I also wasn't going to let the social workers who were not doing their job get away with it, because you're talking about children here. And if a social worker who, is not on the ball for a case, children, it's a traumatic result for children for the rest of their lives. They're already in a terrible situation. I'm not anti-social worker. My daughter is a social worker and worked for the county for many, many years. My mother was a therapist and initially did public interest work. So I don't know. We don't know, but all of a sudden I was being affidavit on every new case, and you get, 2 to 5 new cases every day almost. And our presiding judge thought, just let it go, it'll blow over, but it wasn't blowing over. And then, Judge Nash, who was the presiding judge, issued an order that allowed the newspapers and the public to come and watch some proceedings, and they ended up in my court, and there ended up being, 2, at least I think there was 3 newspaper articles, but 2 significant editorials about what was going on. And it was, basically, why are you papering somebody who's been a child advocate for all these years? And so anyway, we ended up having a meeting, and it did blow over, and I ended up moving to a different court. And I think it's always important to look at your part in it. And I think my part is that at the time, coming from family law, there's different cultures and different disciplines. And I was approaching some of my cases more like a family law judge than a dependency judge. So I take some responsibility. I don't regret any of my decisions, but I take some responsibility for how I approached some of those cases in retrospect, and have certainly learned much more about how important it is, and this is for lawyers, of course, to understand that there's different cultures, not only in disciplines, but also in each courthouse.
What is the difference in your approach to a family case versus a dependency case?
That would take a little bit too long to discuss, but they're very different. First of all, you have 3 or 4 lawyers, and it really it was much more of the practice to bring the lawyers back into the chambers and talk about it. I mean, I actually have done that quite a bit in family, but I think I was also more, I was stricter, and I wanted the new group of lawyers who came to dependency were different than the group of lawyers when I started. When I started, most of us had been lawyers for a number of years, and now they have a lot of lawyers who are fresh out of law school. And I felt like, at least at that time, that there wasn't enough deference to the process, and just as a professional environment. So I think I got some pushback there as well.
So now, from your seat on the bench, what is some of the most important advice you can give practitioners today, whether they're longtime experienced attorneys or just starting out?
Well, I don't know that I'm qualified to give advice like that. I think that it's important to be passionate about what you do, to enjoy what you do, and to let it go at the end of the day. It's important to work hard, no matter how much you're being paid. And to think about how you want to be perceived as a lawyer, how you want to be remembered as a lawyer. I think I was joking with you guys earlier that you all talk about us all the time. Well, we talk about you too. And, when I first got on the bench in family law and we would discuss cases, the first question that was asked was, who are the lawyers? Not because we really talked about you in any kind of personal way, but I think that gave some other judges an idea of how was the case being litigated. When I say that, that doesn't mean that we remember every little case or every little hearing. And, we understand that sometimes you say or do things that you are doing because that's what your client wants. I'm getting off topic here, but, for me, it's an honor to practice law. And we are providing a service and civility and working together. You are mentoring your clients on how to communicate, especially in family law. So, I often say to the parents, you are showing your children how best to communicate when you have a conflict with someone. Well, that's true for lawyers too with their clients.
So, and that raises a point that I think we all have to deal with as practitioners, and I'm sure judicial officers have to deal with as well. And that's that family law practice can be very emotional, and the parties are in an emotional, typically very difficult time in their lives. How do you think attorneys can improve keeping the emotion out of it? How do judges keep the emotion out of it, especially in our practice?
Well, I don't know that you can totally keep the emotion out of it. I mean, we're human beings, right? So we're going to feel angry, we're going to feel sad. And that's okay. That's okay. But for me, I'll just say that I often say, I'm just the judge. I can't impact people's lives. I can't go into their home. I can't micromanage them, nor do I want to. And it's important that I take care of myself, right? And that lawyers take care of themselves, that you take time off, that for me, doing exercise and, spending time with friends is really important. And, just getting some distance, because this work is definitely all consuming.
So let's pivot a little bit and spend a little bit of our remaining time. Let's turn you in from Judge Pellman to Professor Pellman. for a second and look at a couple interesting cases that you were actually involved in that were these were the cases that we provided as the materials. Let's start with CM versus MC. I guess before we go into the case, what's it like getting raised up on appeal as a trial judge? What's that? Does that trigger anything, or does that do anything?
You get used to it. I mean,
You do.
In dependency, appeals are, you get free representation. That's why we have so many published dependency cases. I think when you're a new judge, it's scary and you're worried about your reputation. But as you move along, you just realize that, again, we're just human. We're going to make mistakes. You do the best you can, and maybe you'll learn something, or the discipline will learn something from your mistakes as well.
I like that. So in this one, you were affirmed. So that worked out, I guess, in that sense, right? But it was a surrogacy case. The surrogate challenged the surrogacy agreement and sought parental rights. The agreement was enforced. What was there anything particularly challenging about this case for you as the judge? What were the central issues you were looking at here?
Well, I mean, I suppose I should mention that at least currently, and I think since 2013, I am the only judge in Los Angeles that presides over surrogacy cases. It started in Dependency, and I took them with me back to family law, where really they belong. And I've gotten very, much more interested and involved in that area of law as well. And we were able to pass the first local rule in all of the state of California, which I think provides lawyers a better idea of how to organize their cases and how to present their cases, which has had the unintended consequence of making Los Angeles a lot more popular. So I've gone from 100 cases to over 1,000 now.
Wow.
But this case was, most cases are mostly pro forma, although it's a scary field in the sense that it's so new and there are so many legal medical ethics issues. There were some serious issues in San Diego at one point, so you really don't want to, you never want to be on the front page of the LA Times. But this was an interesting case. It was litigated essentially by Harold Cassidy. And Harold Cassidy, was the lawyer for the Baby M case in the 70s, which was the first surrogacy case. So he's a New Jersey lawyer. He's very well known for trying to overturn surrogacy and also involved in anti-abortion cases as well as other cases. So it was a little shocking because when they came into my court, they filed, just reams and reams and reams of paperwork. And essentially they were trying to revisit the constitutionality, which had already been decided by the California Supreme Court. It was, factually, it was an interesting case. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, was it unusual for constitutional claims to be raised in your trial court, or is that something that comes up a lot?
No, it was very unusual. They had gone to federal court, had been denied. They ended up going back to federal court. It was really interesting. But and basically the litigant wanted to keep one of the three that she was pregnant with triplets. And as you, from reading the case, you also know that the litigant was a single father who is deaf and a postman who lives with his elderly parents. So the set of facts were not your typical surrogacy case. And so there was sort of the practical issues, which were, by the time the case got to me, she was way beyond the possibility of reducing. That was an issue. There had been an issue of her reducing from 3 to 2, but that was not even a possibility by the time they came to me. But they were very passionate lawyers.
Just keeping an eye on the time here. I want to make sure that before we wrap up in a few minutes that we can also touch upon marriage of Crier. That was another appeal where you were the trial court judge, and that was also affirmed. And I guess the one question that I would touch upon before we move on would be, what was uniquely challenging about this case, and what do you think the takeaway is for practice?
Well, I think what was uniquely challenging was that there was not an answer.
New
and
law.
So I had in the law, so I had to make it up, basically. And I had to decide, what were the unusual circumstances here, Fortunately, I was intimately knowledgeable about the dependency system, so I knew exactly what was going on there. And I think that actually helped, because it was a crossover case. But it was an unusual circumstance where, I had to really look at the child's best interest in looking at child support, and, keeping child support at a certain level, even though the parent at the time did not have very much visitation. So it was also a hotly litigated case, but really also really interesting, and really challenged me to look at what were the creative solutions. And as you know, it's a case that's cited a lot at this point.
Is it fair to say that one of the takeaways could be that the court should look at the best interest of the children above the parties, or is that too broad of a reading?
That's too broad of a reading, because we always look at the best interest of the child.
Fair.
Well, not that we don't want to talk more about these cases, but we are reaching our last minute, and we want to let everyone get back to their days. So we usually wrap up we have a theme of sort of asking a final question of everyone who comes on our program. And that's, what advice would you give to either your younger self, or if you were speaking to a younger attorney who's just starting out in family law, that's something that you wish you knew when you started down this road?
Shoot for your passion. Don't worry about overshooting. And within what you do, always try to help people.
Well, that's pretty good advice. If you follow your passion and you try to help people, it's hard to not like your job. Okay, so that is the end of our program. Everyone, please mark your calendars so that you can join us for our next episodes, always at 12:30. Our next guests are Ron Brote on April 6th, Dan Jaffe on May 4th, Alexandra Leichter on June 1st, and then Kendra Thomas and Gina Kang, who are our section co-chairs, on July 6th. We want to thank Genna, Yael, and Belinda from the bar, the Family Law Executive Committee, which is just, I just said, led by Gina Kang and Kendra Thomas, and all of our section sponsors. Most importantly, again, thank you, Judge Pellman, for taking the time to be with us and for sharing so much.
Thank you. It's been an honor.